Hi, you're watching Saturday in the Woodworking Shop with Andrew Pitts, where we talk things woodworking. I got a question from Mark. He was asking a question about my wood storage area, which is the basement of the shop. He said, how do you keep the area dehumidified and what relative humidity do you keep it? Well, before I answer that question and talk about the whole house dehumidifier that I have down here, let's talk just a minute about why to dehumidify in the first place. I live in Eastern Virginia, so in the summer we get very, very humid. Inside most houses is air conditioning and of course heating. And so the average year-round relative humidity, it would be anywhere from 30 to 40% in the winter and 40 to 50% in the summer. So you figure that's an average moisture content of the wood of somewhere between 7 and 8%. So that's what I shoot for when I kiln dry my wood. I try to get it to 7 to 8% moisture content. Now, in the summer around here, you know, if it's 90 degrees outside, it may be 85–90% relative humidity. I mean, that's very, very common. So you can't keep the wood out in that kind of humidity. That equates to about a 17.5% moisture content, which is really, really high. Just to give you an example of how damaging that moisture content can be, if you took wood, let's say 10-inch wide plank of red oak plain sawn, from 17.5% moisture content down to 7.5% moisture content, you could expect to see shrinkage of around 3/8 of an inch. So if you try to make furniture, or if I try to make furniture out of wood with that high moisture content, I'm asking for real trouble later on with my client. So I keep my wood down around 7 to 8% moisture content year-round in my storage area in the basement so that it's ready to use at any time. And the way I'm calculating these moisture contents, I'm using a very handy device I got from Lee Valley. It's called a Wood Movement Reference Guide, and it's got on the back a table that shows temperatures versus relative humidities and what the equilibrium moisture content of wood would be at those various temperatures. So it's really kind of cool to use. On the front, it's got a little wheel here. Pick out your species of wood listed around the outside, dial it in to the little arrow here, and read off the wood movement specifications. So take, for example, red oak. Tangentially sawn moves 0.0037 inches per percent moisture content per inch of width. So if I have a 10-inch wide board, that's 10. If I have a change of, say, 10% moisture content, like in my example, there's another 10. So 10 times 10 is 100, times 0.0037 equals 0.37 inches for that board. That's 3/8 of an inch. That's a lot of movement. In keeping an area dry, I think there's three main criteria. First of all, you got to isolate the area. You got to keep air from infiltrating in and out from the outside. And that means having good seals on the garage door and good seals on any vents you have. Now here you can see my garage door for the basement part. I've got two of these, one on each end of the building, but I've sealed them nicely with seals all the way around and a seal on the bottom. So it does a pretty good job of keeping the air out. Also, these are insulated doors, so it helps to keep the temperature inside a little bit higher than the outside in the winter. Now the second criteria is to reduce the moisture transmission into the space. And that can come from a couple of places. It's probably not going to come from the ceiling because that's the shop upstairs, which is heated and air conditioned. But it might come in through the concrete walls, particularly through the walls that are below the soil line, you know, the subsurface walls. And so those, when I built the workshop, I waterproofed on the outside to reduce that moisture transmission. But the other big source of moisture is the floor. When I built this workshop, I was trying to do it on a budget, and I thought I could get away with just putting gravel on the floor in the garage area. So if you drive in from the outside through the garage with, say, the tractor and a load of wood, you'd be driving on gravel, no big problem. Well, what I learned is that moisture just wicks right up through that gravel year-round and keeps that gravel moist. So what I had to do was put concrete slabs down throughout the entire basement area, and those concrete slabs are on top of insulation. I put 1-inch thick blue styrofoam insulation all the way around the gravel that I would then lay the concrete on top of, and I sealed it with tape. So when I poured the slab down here, I used this blue styrofoam around the edges, and I used that 1-inch thick blue styrofoam with a little tongue and groove connector here, all under this horizontally. Not only did I reduce any moisture transmission through the styrofoam, because that's essentially impervious, but I also insulated the slab, and that did two things. First of all, it helped keep the basement down here a little warmer in the winter, which means that if it's warmer than the outside air, the relative humidity is naturally going to be less. Also, moisture has a tendency to want to move from warmer areas to cooler areas, so by having my slab warmer than the external, the ground, there's even less tendency for moisture to want to come up through the slab. And that's actually worked very, very well. In the winter, I don't even run a dehumidifier down here because it doesn't work well in the winter. It's just a little too cold down here for it to work efficiently. And as I said, it doesn't really need to work. So I have a whole house dehumidifier that mostly works in the summer when I'm really worried about getting humidity in here, especially if I have to open the garage doors for something. This particular model's from a place called Thermostore, and it's made so you can actually hook it up to ducting in your house if you want, which I do have in my house, by the way, and it works very well. But this dehumidifier is designed to take a large space like this underground area here, which is I probably have maybe 1,800 feet of conditioned area, square feet of conditioned area. This unit takes a suction up here through some filters, and the actual condensate comes out this hose and goes through the wall, and I have a pipe in the wall that extends out about 10 feet into the front of the shop above ground level, and the water just naturally drains off. So that ends up keeping the shop very dry. So finally, I have a hygrometer on the wall. This is a little temperature, thermometer, hygrometer combination, and I can monitor my temperature and my relative humidity. So, I just can turn on the dehumidifier when I need to and save some money when I don't.